What's going on, guys? Scar coming at you with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we're gonna be diving into another set of meta decks that are pretty prominent in the rank and ladders as you are playing through the arena, trying to rank up to the higher ranks to hopefully get to a certain rank by the end of the season. In my last video, I did like the top 5 meta decks, and there was, a couple comments here and there, about something I may have forgotten, something that's prominent in the meta as a whole, but it wasn't what people were actively playing a lot of on the rank and ladder. So I decided to just do another 5 decks that are prominently played. This is a little bit of a mixture, as I kind of went with what I feel like I see a lot more so than what the stats were telling me, just because, sometimes something is the flavor of the week one day, and then next thing you know, it's completely different the following week. So in this video, we're going to be diving deep into a few decks, go over them, kind of talk about the deck, how they may have changed maybe since you saw the previous iteration, but kind of go into a little bit more detail into these decks and kind of give you a rough idea of what they are like. If you like these videos, guys, slap that like button, but let's move on to the deck techs. All right, and so the first deck up we have is Sultai Control. It's jokingly I called it the Sultai Salts just because it is a deck that pretty much targets your opponent's things, does all the things to your opponent's creatures, lands, hand, you name it. This deck does something to affect what your opponent can do on their turn. The deck is pretty straightforward, nothing really to shake up from Ikoria as a whole. There's a couple things that may have been added, like the Heartless Axe and the Shark Typhoons, but as the deck as a whole, it's a pretty straight, thorough control deck that splashes in black for a couple hand hate and creature hate. So let's go over the cards, break it down, and kind of look at the sideboard as well. So the first card up is Heartless Act. It's a very strong kill target creature with no counters on it. Also, you can move three counters from target creature, which is good, I guess, if you're in that cycling matchup. You want to move some counters from target creature, but overall 2 cost instant speed. Creature hate is always good. Thought Erasure, everyone hates when they get a Thought Erasure played on them. Pretty much you look at your opponent's hand, get an idea of what they're playing, and then you get to look at your top card, whether you want to keep it or throw it in the bin. Solid card. Tyrant Scorn, yet again another card to get the early game threats off the board, and you can always use it late game to bounce a creature back to your opponent's hand. Also solid card. Gruul Spile for that little bit of ramp to kind of get some more lands onto the battlefield, as well as draw a card. Solid card. Mystical Dispute to counter some blue spells if we're in a blue matchup for 1, or just counter target spell for 3, and your opponent has to pay 3 if they want to prevent this from countering their spell. Narset, because every control deck needs the Narset, because you got to dig the top 5 of your library, look for a non-land card, non-creature card, add it to your hand, kind of get something that kind of combats what maybe your opponent is playing, or the idea of its passive ability of just not letting your opponent draw more than 1 card. Always a good thing, especially against the cycling decks that are now like everywhere, I feel like. Then you got Uro. Well, enough can be said about Uro. It's just such a strong card for 3. The fact that you gain 3 life, get to put an additional land back in the battlefield, and if you want, you can exile 5 cards from our graveyard and put them onto the battlefield to do this all over again. Solid card nonetheless. That's why he's so valuable and sought after. Extinction Event. It's a cool little Wrath of God effect for black. Pretty much you choose odd or even, and instead of destroying the creatures, they get exiled. So maybe you're playing against mono red and they play that darn annex on you. You can pretty much say odd, gets rid of that annex, doesn't kill it so they don't get the tokens, and removes all the pesky 1-drops, 3-drops, 5-drops. Or if you want to go the even route, maybe they're playing a deck that consists of a bunch of even cards, 2s, 4s, 6s, and so on and so forth. Oh, and 0 because counters are 0, in case you didn't know that. You got Tamiyo for another thing that pretty much prevents our opponent from making us discard cards or sacrifice our permanents. Also, the fact that we choose a non-name card, we look at reveal the top 4 cards of our library, we put that card of the chosen name among them into our hand and the rest in the graveyard. So if we want to try to dig for something, maybe we want to dig for a Narset, we just try to, we say Narset, we look at the top 4. If Narset's one of those cards, we put it in our hand. If not, those 4 cards go in the bin, and then we can -3 possibly and return target card from our graveyard to our hand, which is another solid effect. If there's something that we already may have played, maybe we played an Extinction Event, our opponents played a bunch of odd or even cards on the battlefield, and then we just play it again. Solid effect. Nissa, who shakes the world, because Nissa, the fact that she makes 1, our green mana produce additional mana, 2, our lands now become creatures with vigilance and attack our opponent's face. And if we get to the -8, we can pretty much get all the forests from our deck, or cards that have forest in the description, and pretty much put on the battlefield tapped, as well as all our lands now have the indestructible, so they can't be targeted. Solid card. Yet again, another planeswalker that, you know, when someone plays it, it's like, oh man. Shark Typhoon is another solid card that I think a lot of control decks are now running, just because of its cycling ability to tap 2 and X, and we get an XX Shark token onto the battlefield with whatever we spend for X. And I guess if we want to and be a little bit like, you know, like we may have a couple plays, we can play Shark Typhoon for its enchantment cost. And pretty much every time we play a non-creature spell, because this is a control deck, we get an XX Shark token where X is the cost of that spell that we did play. And another solid effect of that card. Casualties of War, because Sultai wants to run artifact hate, creature hate, enchantment hate, land hate, planeswalker hate. This card does it all, gets rid of one of each. And you get to choose one or more, so it's not like you play this and only get to choose one. It does all the above. So your opponent may have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You get to target all of it and put them a land behind. Solid thing. The lands for a control deck, you know what they are. They are pretty much 2 islands, 1 swamp, 2 forests, couple temples, watery graves, overgrown tombs, breeding pools, temple of masteries, triome, and 3 fabled passages to land out the deck. The deck has a pretty decent curve where we curve out about 3.5 card cost, 27 lands, and 33 things to play. Overall, solid deck, especially in a best of 3 standpoint. I would say control decks have the advantage. In the best of 1, you may run into a couple decks that without maybe a few tweaks, you could probably make it more best of 1 viable. Let's look at the sideboard real quick in case you are about that. Also down below, I'll also like post all these deck lists down below, just so you guys can add them, export them to Magic Arena if you want to play these decks. Though I will say this, I did pull these off of Aether Hub, so these are decks that just kind of came from tournaments. So these are just tournament winning decks, or decks that plays very well in maybe a Magic event that just got X amount of points. So that's I didn't create these decks on my own. I just took from what I saw in the meta breakdown. But the sideboard is, I guess, incomplete because I don't know why I'm missing 2 cards. But it's 2 Disfigures, 2 Disdainful Strokes, 2 Noxious Grabs, 2 Mystical Disputes, 2 Cry of the Canariums. Oh, that's why I don't have all a set of Leyline of the Voids, but 4 Leyline of the Voids if you want to play 4, and 1 Thought Distortion, because why not? Overall solid deck, but let's move on to the next one. Moving on to the blue-white Azorious control deck. Of course, you can't be Azorious control nowadays, or a control deck that runs blue and run Yorion and not run the 80 card pile of all the things. Pretty much we run Yorion, the planeswalker that pretty much flickers a lot of our stuff out of the play and then back into play, and we get to trigger the effects yet again. Solid companion. It makes your deck a little bit bulkier if you play it as a companion, but 80 cards, but you get to put 80 good cards into the deck that maybe you wouldn't be able to put in a 60 card deck. This is the Azorious. There is that pesky Luca version of this deck that runs out there that's super duper annoying to trigger, just, you know, Agent of Treacheries and stuff like that. But this deck list is a little bit different. So let's break it down, kind of go over the things and kind of see what this deck is playing. So, like I said, the Orions are companion. We're running 80 cards. Like, that's why I called it pile of cards, because 80 cards. But we got 3 glass caskets to get rid of things that are small on the battlefield early game. Exile them until this leaves the battlefield. Birth and Mellitus, because you need the search for the planes, get a wall in, gain some life. Essence Scatter, because we don't want creatures played on us, so we have a 2 cost counter. Omen of the Sea, because why not draw scry 2 and then draw a card, and especially Flicker with Yorion makes it awesome. Mystical Dispute, because yet again we need more counters because it's control. Counters anything for blue for 1. Counter target spell its control pays 3 if we pay for its full cost. Narset, because yet again blue control needs to run a Narset to dig things, look for answers, and or just get things to answer, and eventually anything that comes out into the battlefield, and just to slow our opponent down from drawing things off the top. Thirst for Meaning, just because we can dig a little bit deeper. We play enchantment, so we can discard an enchantment card, or we discard 2 solid instant speed draw card. Absorb, because more counters. Teferi, because we don't want our opponents playing things on our turn. This slows our opponents down if they're playing like a flash tempo deck, and it also pretty much stops like the Temur Reclamation decks from playing anything like like at the end of their turn, and also there's no Ember Cleave during the battle type thing. So just get sort of some of those pesky things, and you know, of course, you can make all your sorcery spells instant speed or have flash, and then you get to bounce something back to your opponent's hand and draw a card from that. Shadow the Sky, because we're playing the white, why not make sure the battle feels nice and clean for all our nice things. Elspeth, Conqueror's Death, because we don't want anything big on the battlefield, and make our opponents pay for playing those big things, making their non-creature spells cost 2 more, get things back from our graveyard with +1/+1 counter. Or loyalty counter, so we get our planeswalkers back, we get a creature, we maybe get our Yorion back, something like that, just on the battlefield, just to make it a solid overall choice. Shark Typhoon, because yet again we're playing a control deck. All control decks nowadays seem to just be playing Shark Typhoon. Either play it for its full cost or just play it for its cycling cost. Solid card. You may see a lot in this video. This card comes into a lot of these control decks. I actually think a couple of these decks are control decks, so just a heads up, this card's going to come up often. Dream Trawler, because yet again, blue-white control, need a flyer lifelinker. Every time we draw a card, we get +1, it gets +1/+0. And then whenever he attacks, you get to draw a card, and then we can discard a card and pretty much give it hexproof so our opponent can't directly target it. This deck is going to make us draw a lot of cards, so it's all good when we play the Dream Trawler. Agent of Treachery, because Yorion Flicker, and you know, just because it's a high cost blue spell, maybe get rid of that one pesky thing that our opponent gets that we just don't have an answer for, and now it becomes ours, and our opponent's like, crap. Lands, yet again, a pile of lands because we're playing a ton of cards. 3 Castle Arendales, 7 Plains, 2 Council of Vantress Scry, 8 Islands, 4 Hollow Fountains, 4 Temples of Enlightenment, 4 Fabled Passages, and 1 Field of Ruin, because let's just get rid of target non-basic land and opponent controls. Solid card. But overall, this is a pile of cards that pretty much, like I said, controls the game, gets it in your advantage, flickers a few things, and probably you're more than likely going to beat down your opponent with a Shark Typhoon to end the game. Going into the sideboard, yet again, a pretty solid sideboard. Spectral Sailors, Aether Gust, Dovin Vetoes, another Yorion, I guess, 2 Archon of Sun's Grace, some Mystical Disputes. I think I'm going to bump that up to that because I just realized it's not at full. And why not put one more? So this is the sideboard, but this is pretty much a solid sideboard. Yet again, another deck that benefits maybe with a few tweaks to make it more playable in best of 1, but this deck here in a best of 3 matchup probably is going to handle a lot of those decks that are just very good best of 1 and in no trouble at all. All right. This is the one deck that I was told that I kind of forgot on, a deck that runs rampant in ranked, but it's pretty much your Temur Reclamation deck. The deck hasn't really changed as much as maybe some of the other decks, adding like Yorions and things like that, but this deck is pretty much a solid deck list out there that if you may have this list still built, it's still very, very strong. Even in a best of 1, the idea of just Wilderness Reclamation, giving our lands the ability to untap after we've already tapped it and done stuff on our turn, and the ability to cast things, you know, on our opponent's turn, or just kind of like trigger our resolve various reclamations, pump up X amount of mana, and then blast our opponent's face with an explosion or even expanse. But overall, the deck is pretty straightforward. It doesn't run anything too crazy from the list that you may have seen. A couple tweaks here and there, maybe to make it a little bit more viable in a more best of 1 setup. But let's kind of just go over everything, kind of break it down, and kind of look at what it is. So you got the 4 ops just for some draws and the scries to kind of get a little bit deeper into your deck. Essence Scatter to counter target creature spell, Negate to counter target non-creature spell. Scorching Dragonfires to get rid of those pesky things that are maybe 3 damage, 3 life or less, or Planeswalker, and then it gets exiled so they can't return it back with like a Elspeth's Conqueror's Death. Growth Spirals for a little bit ramp, Mystical Disputes, just because yet again it's another control-y deck, so why not have some disputes to pretty much counter things that our opponents may play in the early game, and or counter anything blue for the cost of 1 mana. Arrow for that little bit of extra ramp, they get a little bit extra life, get an extra land on the battlefield. Another solid card. Chemist's Insight to pretty much get some extra cards, as well as if we discard this, we can play it from our graveyard to get an additional 2 cards. Wilderness Reclamation, this is what the deck revolves around. The ability to untap our lands at the end of our turn, which then gives us the ability to kind of, if we play multiple of these, resolve each one individually to build up X amount of mana, to then put it into our X spells that we may want to either dig for things and or play very, very big things. Shark Typhoon, we can get a very big shark from our cycling here, or we can play this for its 6 cost on our turn. And a turn, we then play some Thassa's Intervention or Expansion Explosion, maybe for like 10, let's just say, and pretty much then we copy that and we get an XX, a 10-10 Shark Typhoon, a 10-10 Thoughts of Intervention, like 10-10 Shark from that. Then you get the Thoughts of Intervention for the counter ability, and also the ability to pretty much look at the top X cards of our library, put 2 of the cards into our hand, and the rest on the bottom are in a random order. So this is to look for maybe our expansion or explosion in case we really need it. Then expansion, explosion, you know, we can copy target instant or sorcery spell, convert mana cost 4 or less, and we choose new targets for that copy. But the explosion is really what the deck is built around, to pretty much blow up our opponent's face by building up wilderness, like reclamations, playing a lot of lands onto the battlefield, and, you know, just throwing it out there, maybe the explosion doesn't kill our opponent, but if you make like a Garuda deck or something like that, draw an additional X amount of cards, pretty much you're gonna get them to either deck themselves or get them into a position that they're gonna pretty much lose the game because they can't draw anything from their library because they draw out. Another deck that plays a lot of lands. A lot of the decks we are going over today have a lot of lands in them, so 3 Castle of Entresses, 2 Islands, 1 Mountain, 2 Forests, 4 Steam Vents, 1 Temple of Empathy, 4 Stomping Grounds, 4 Breeding Pools, 2 Ketra's Triomes, 1 Blast Zone, and 4 Fabled Passages. Overall, the deck list consists of 28 lands, 26 instants, 7 enchantments, 3 creatures. The deck really is trying to kill your opponent with an expansion explosion, ramp up high fast enough to pretty much get a lot of mana on the battlefield. When we play our Wilderness Reclamation, we can play it maybe on turn 3, play it, untap our lands, and then have at it, because we can either not play anything during our turn, go to the end of turn, tap 4 lands, Reclamation goes into effect, untap, tap 4 down again, and do something for 8, you know, so on and so forth. The deck is pretty much abuses Reclamation to pretty much pay high cost X spells. Overall, the deck is very solid. It still runs rampant in a lot of tournaments. I always see it either do very well, if not win in tournaments, just because the deck list is just that good. Especially in the best of 3 and a best of 1, you may have a little bit, if you don't get a good fast start, especially with some of the faster decks, you may lose. But overall, this deck is still very solid from head to toe. Now moving on to the sideboard, the deck is pretty straightforward with just a couple of things, just to maybe like, depending on your matchup, to kind of negate some things. Some Aether Gusts, maybe for those red or green matchups, negates to kind of more spells if your opponent's playing a very control heavy deck. Frag, because this spell deals 5 damage to target white or blue creature, so in case maybe they're playing some sort of blue-white control and or some sort of mono-white deck, this is a good card. Scorch and Dragonfire, just for additional things to get rid of more planeswalkers or more small creatures and exile them. Wilt, because it destroys target artifact or enchantment. It's a solid destroy spell for that. Mystical Dispute, because just in case we want to get an extra one if we want to be a little more on the control side. Flame Sea, in case our opponent's playing a lot of micro small things like cycling, like they can produce a lot of tokens, this will just sweep the board and get rid of those tokens. And Night Peck Ambusher, because like we're not really playing many things on our turn. If we ambusher on our opponent's turn, don't play anything during our turn, and then play the Reclamation, all that stuff, pretty much we're gonna get tokens and eventually overrun our opponent. Overall, solid deck. And another Yorion deck. This one is more of the Esper variety. The deck here is, yet again, just like all the other Yorion decks, it's very control heavy. We throw in some black for a couple extra black cards that kind of just do a little bit extra, kind of dig a little bit deeper, but overall it's kind of the same as our blue-white control Yorion deck, but we'll kind of go over this one too, just because it's another deck that you may run into, especially in the ladder. So Yorion, because of its flicker ability. Omen the Seas, because yet again, draw a card and scry 2. Heartless Act for the destroy ability. Dovin's Veto for the little bit extra spell counters. Brazen Borrower for that bounce, and also Flash Flyer. Neutralize for more counters. Teferi to kind of slow our opponent down from not playing anything on our turn, and because it's just Teferi. Extinction Event, just because it's another Wrath of God effect, because this deck doesn't play any Wrath, like any Day of Judgment, so we play Extinction Event to exile those cards, and we can choose even or odd. Artists, because Atreus, because we can now make our opponent make a choice by putting things into piles. Either we put 1 or 2 face down, and then they put 1 or 2 face up, and we get to choose one of the piles, and it goes to our hand, the other card goes to our graveyard. Elspeth Conqueror's Death, because yet again, in a blue-white, black, or blue-white any deck, you're probably gonna play Elspeth Conqueror's Death, because it's just such a strong card and just stays on the battlefield to kind of slow maybe down a fellow spellcaster deck of some sorts. Shark Typhoon, because yet again, it's blue-white control deck, or blue-white X deck. And this card's just so good, especially when maybe our opponent's played a Teferi, and we kind of can still cycle a shark out at the end of our opponent's turn to then be able to attack the Teferi down. Dream Trawler, because yet again, it's another strong card to pretty much not have our opponent gain life, we give it hexproof, and it just draws its cards. Then the lands, pile of lands, Castle Arden Vales, 2 plains, 6 islands, 1 swamp, 4 Hallowed Fountains, 4 Godless Shrines, 4 Temple of the Seas, 4 Water Graves, 3 Ragaran Triomes, 1 Zagnoth Triome, and 4 Fable Passages. Overall, like I said, solid deck. Another fun little counter deck. Just similar to our blue-white control deck, swaps out a few things to kind of make it a little bit more mana efficient based on what we're playing, so you don't see any absorbs and things like that. But overall, solid deck. Now going into the sideboard. Okay, the sideboard is a little bit more basic than compared to all the other ones. So you got the negates, Desparks, Othakaya, Shatter the Sky. I think I'm supposed to have one more negate, so I don't have any Othakayas, but still overall things to target for Yorion, extra board wipes, Desparks for things if our opponent's playing big things. Overall, the deck is just to add more control aspects based on what our opponents are playing. But overall, solid deck to try out. All right, now moving on to the last deck. This deck is a deck I've kind of seen builds going to go around more recently. I feel like I've seen more people make some videos on it playing these decks. But this deck is a Gruul's deck. It's pretty much the same deck that's been going around, but it has a couple things added with the new set. Overall, we're playing the ikoria companion for the vigilance, and also given the ability to give our things +1/+1, which is very solid. It takes our grazers to 1/1/4s, and just has various other things to kind of annoy our opponent just that little bit more. So to go over the deck, let's dive into it. So the ikoria, just like I said, for its +1/+1 and vigilance for each cat, elemental, dinosaur, or beast creature in our deck. Adventurous Impulse to look at our top 3 of our library, to reveal a creature or land card, put it into our hand, the rest in the bottom of our library. Grazer, because it's our little bit of extra ramp in the deck to get additional land on the battlefield. Scorching Daggerfire, just to target something that we just want off the field and exile it when it dies. Thrashing Brontodon to get rid of artifacts and or enchantments in case our opponent's playing fires or Embercleave or anything you just want to get rid of that's an artifact or enchantment that is going to be annoying. Fires and Invention, because we're running red, might as well run fires, just play things for free and take all the advantage of it. Gem Razors to mutate to do the same thing as the threat Brantodon to destroy artifacts or enchantments, and it mutates so you can put it on something small like a Grazer or something like that and just make it a 4/4 if we want to, and give it reach and trample. Questing Beast, because Questing Beast is just so strong. Yet again, it can't be blocked by things with power 2 or less. Has Death Touch, has Taste, has Vigilance, and combat damage that be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented. So pretty much they can't do anything to their creature to prevent the damage that be done by Questing Beast. It's still going to go through regardless. Shift Inside Ceratops to not be countered, protection from blue, and we can tap 1 and give it tap 1 green and give it a choice of reach, trample, haste until end of turn. Cavalier Flames, in case there's anything in our hand like lands or something like that we just want to get rid of and dig a little bit deeper, we can throw them in the bin and get X amount of additional cards. We can tap 2, give it +1, we give our creatures +1/+0 and give them all haste. With this and Fires and Invention, pretty much the minute he comes into the battlefield, whatever we have on the battlefield is going to have haste, and additional +1/+0. It could end the game pretty much right there, then and there. And then on top of it, if he does die, it deals X damage to each opponent, or they control where X is the number of land cards in our graveyard. So if we get rid of lands into our bin, it's going to deal X damage to target player based on that. Vivian, because yet again, we can look. She's very good in this deck just because of the ability to tap, look at our top card, play our top card. I'm stuttering, I don't know why. As long as it's a creature card, we can +1 get play a 3/3 green beast token onto the battlefield with vigilance, reach, or trample, or we can -2, and then when we cast our next creature spell this turn, we can search our library for a creature card with lesser converted mana cost and put it onto the battlefield. So if we play one of our bigger creatures and then play her, we can just get an additional creature on the battlefield for almost not paying anything. Solid Planeswalker overall. Quartzwood Crasher, because why not throw a card in the deck that has trample, and then whenever one or more creatures with trample deal combat damage to a player, we get an XX green dinosaur beast creature token on the battlefield with trample, where X is the amount of damage those creatures have dealt to our opponent. The turn we play this, we have Cavalier Flames or something like that, it's maybe GG's right there. But if they don't kill this and they get the X damage through trample, we're gonna get an XX dinosaur in the battlefield, and they're probably more than likely going to be dead the following turn. This deck is very, very interesting from what I've seen. Various people who posted videos on this Gruul setup. It plays very, very smoothly. Sometimes the fires is just a bonus, but you don't really need the fires to win. Fires does limit you in certain things, but if you do get the fires for other things, it kind of is a benefit. But overall, the deck plays very, very solidly. Oh, and not to forget, because, you know, this deck may seem good as is, I forgot the Embercleave, because why not throw Embercleave on one of our big creatures, give +1/+1, and double strike and trample, because, yet again, why not? And if we get we don't get any board clears or anything like that, this Embercleave could hit very early based on what we could play very, very early, because our curve is pretty decent. The deck plays a decent amount of lands. We play 6 mountains, 8 forests, 4 stomp grounds, 4 temple of abandon, 3 Bonder's Enclave just for the draw for the late game in case our hands get a little bit light, and 3 fabled passages to round it out. Overall, the deck plays pretty decently at an average curve of 3.7. If we get some decent mana ramp, the curve is okay. The deck plays enough lands to hopefully get to them. The lands shouldn't be an issue, but overall 21 creatures, 1 source, 1 instant, 2 sorceries, 2 artifacts, 4 enchantments. Diving into the sideboard, the deck is pretty straightforward in that essence. We have, sorry, the companion throws me off because it's at the top of the list. 3 Grafdigger's Cages to pretty much prevent our opponents from playing things from our graveyards and libraries can't enter the battlefield. So it turns down Winota, it turns down Garudas, it turns down anything that comes out of our graveyard, and they also can't cast spells from their graveyard and or library. So if anything were to do the same thing as a Winota or something like that for spells, they can't do the same thing. They can't play escapes for spells. Fries, because 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker, that's white or blue. Scorching Dragonfire for that little bit, maybe just extra damage on the board in case our opponent's playing something maybe very, very quick. Cinder Vines for that control matchup to kind of, every time our opponents play a non-creature spell, they just get dealt 1 damage to that player based on how many Cinder Vines we have out. Then we can sacrifice and destroy target artifact or enchantment and deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller. So solid card for that matchup. Yet again, more board wipes or board sweeps just based on if our opponent's playing a lot of small creatures like the cycling deck. This kind of will wipe out the cycling cards. Extra shift in Ceratops to just, you know, round it out. Maybe our opponent's playing a very blue control deck. This is just another card to pretty much prevent our, you know, just kind of get on the field that our opponent can't counter. But guys, that is the video. Just another couple decks to kind of, you know, that you guys can use and or play for Magic the Gathering Arena to kind of get up your last little bit of whatever rank you want to get to by the end of the season. These decks overall are a solid choice as well compared to the other ones in the previous video. If there's anything I forgot, let me know down in the comments below what decks maybe I forgot or left off the list. Off the top of my head, I know I didn't post any Winota decks. I don't think there was any Garuda decks. I guess people had their fun with those decks, but I guess based on tournaments and things like that the meta kind of goes off of, I guess people aren't playing them as much as they did when the set first dropped out. If you like the video, hit that like button. If you want to post more videos, hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.